Hi, I'm Keith Woods, member here at Rock Haven Church. Pastor Joel asked me if I'd be willing to do a devotional, and I told him I thought that would be a good idea because it'd be a chance for me to maybe do a little introduction to the class I'm hoping to do in April or whenever we're able to gather again. I'm planning to teach a class that talks about the character and attributes of God, and to help us to kind of know if we can know God and how we go about that. And once we answer that question and we learn how we can know God, what does that do to us in terms of how does that impact our lives? There are two books that I'm using to research this class, books that I've read in the past and I've just reread to help me a little bit with just knowing how to approach this. And these have been really important books to me. The first is A.W. Tozer book called The Pursuit of God. It's a very small book, but it's very important in so many ways, and this is actually a very popular book among Christian readers. Highly recommend it. The second is by J.I. Packer called Knowing God, and this book is truly transformational. If you've never read it, I would highly recommend it. I've heard it said by someone that there are three types of books. Books that tell you what to think, way too many of those, especially in the Christian genre. Books that help you to think, and books that change the way you think. I would put both of these books in that category. Very important, and I would highly recommend that you read them. Tonight I want to talk about something that well, we're going through some hard times. And, life is full of hard times. But that's a good time for us to think about, what does God mean to us? What is our relationship with Him? Why does He allow these things? And most important, what does He want us to do in the midst of this in order to impact the world around us? And to do that, I want to take a look at the book of Job. This is a book that's probably not very often studied because it's not really very well understood, I think. But it's really one of my favorites because it talks about just that, hard times, and oftentimes we don't understand why God takes us through certain things and why He allows things in our lives that we just don't see the value of it. And I think the book of Job is a great book to help us to understand that a little bit if we'll kind of work our way through it. So if you would, I'm just going to do a very quick overview and point out a couple things. So it starts out, in the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and he had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. So we can see that Job was a good man. He was well respected, he was wealthy, he had many children, and it seemed that God had really blessed him in many different ways. And he truly had. Then it goes on to say that one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming to and fro among the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There was no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." That's directly from the lips of God. God looked at this man and saw a great character in him, and expressed before Satan a real trust that he would follow God no matter what. So Satan sets up this scheme and basically tells God that he trusts you and he follows you because you favored him. Take away his favor and let's see what happens. So God allows Satan to put Job through several tests, the first of which, in the span of just a very short period of time, through a series of disasters, he loses all 7 of his children, all of his livestock, all of his possessions. Everything's gone. And then after that, God allows Satan to affect even his body, and he's basically stricken with some kind of skin disease that leaves him covered with boils and just extremely painful. But in all of this, Job refuses to reject his faith in God, and he clings to that. And when after the first set of calamities came, it says Job got up, tore his robe, and shaved his head, then fell to the ground in worship. That's really important. He'd just been stricken by a terrible loss, but he fell to the ground in worship of God. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. So even though Job had suffered these tragic losses, he still clung to his faith in God and believing that God had some purpose in it. And it goes on. At one point, his wife even said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." And Job's answer was, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And again, it says, in all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. So you see, Job understood that life isn't always roses and pleasantries, but sometimes it's full of tragedy. But even in the midst of that, we cling to our faith and hope in God. And we're going through some hard times right now. And that's really important for us to do, is to really cling to that faith in God and just trusting that He has some purpose in this, because He does. We may not see it, but He has a purpose, and He's allowed this to happen. We see that with Satan. Satan could only do what God allowed him to do and nothing else. So that's a really important factor to keep in mind. Then some friends show up to help Job, and they're not much help. There are 3 of them, I believe, maybe 4. And there's this whole exchange back and forth multiple times. The friends are convinced that Job has done something wrong. He sinned before God, and basically they keep telling him, you need to admit whatever it is, the sin that you've committed that's causing God to punish you, to treat you in this way. So, not very helpful friends, are they? But Job, through it all, holds to his integrity. And there's a long exchange back and forth in regards to this. But then there's a 4th friend, obviously a younger man, because he holds his tongue until last. And then he says some things that he's right about many things in terms of God's character, but he's still not right about what's going on here, and he doesn't understand, why God has allowed this to happen to Job, and he still doesn't answer that question. Then Job goes into a very long kind of a self-defense and expounding on his understanding of things and his understanding of God, and it's rather lengthy, and I'll let you read it. And then God responds to Job. I think there's 3 chapters here, actually 4, where God responds to Job and basically sets him straight, and he asks a lot of questions, like he begins with, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me." And he goes on to talk about creation and everything that he did in that. and all the powers that he has in doing these things. It's very lengthy, and it really reduces Job to nothing. And he realizes that he has no position to question God in what he does. And that's what he comes to. And just very briefly, I said this was going to be brief, but here's the point of the whole book. And this is what's so important for us to learn, is in the end, Job says, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel with knowledge? Surely I spoke things of which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you will answer me. And here's the point. Job says, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So you see, in the end, after all that Job went through, the thing he came to realize is he had seen God. In all of the stuff that he'd been through, and it tells us that he daily worshipped and made sacrifices to God, even for his children, just in case they might have sinned against God. He was that devout and that good of an understanding that he needed to do this to make sure things were right between him and God. But in the end, he said, I had heard of you, but now I have seen you. You see, he came to a greater, deeper understanding of who God is because of the hardships that God allowed him to go through. And we still don't know the purpose of this, other than for us to have this story and learn from Job that we just need to trust God in the midst of the hard things that we go through, because he has a purpose. And even with what we're going through right now with this whole coronavirus thing, it's frightening. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. There have already been tens of thousands of deaths from it. But God has a purpose. Maybe that purpose is just for us as believers in Jesus Christ, as believers in the living God, to stand up before the world and testify to our faith in God and show the world that we have hope that will come through this. And even if we don't, we have hope in knowing that because of the work that Jesus Christ did in and through our lives, we have hope that we will live for all of eternity with the peace and knowledge and presence of the living God. And that's the most important thing we can have. And that's what we need to do today. We need to model our faith before our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, the world around us, and show them that because of Jesus Christ, we have hope. And that's what we need in this world today, is hope. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great day.